I wanted to talk about muscles, muscle spasm, muscle strain. The concept of muscle spasm can be best understood if you just go through the anatomy. I always like to break down my physiology to what happens with anatomy. A muscle is meant to go across a joint. Muscles work for mobility. They move us. The only way to move is if it goes across a joint, and when the muscle contracts or shortens, it'll technically move the joint. A whole bunch of muscles together will help us propel or go forward or go backward or go into motion. The concept of, let's just take a hamstring for example. This is a hip, this is a leg bone or femur, this is the tailbone back here. The hamstring muscle, which goes from here to here, has a point of origin and a point of insertion. It spans across the hip joint. So when this long muscle here contracts, it shortens, it'll pull the leg backwards. So again, it works to do a movement. And when the movement is actuated here and up in the back, it gives us a certain propulsion. The problem is sometimes when I had a sprinter come in today and he pulled his hamstring with the first of several wind sprints. I guess in basketball you can also call them suicides. Any kind of sprint where you're asked to go into action quick. If the muscle is not ready for it, if the muscle is already strained or broken down or inflamed, if you're not healthy or have problems with the insertion being weak, the tendon-ligament junction or the tendon-bone junction, the muscle-tendon junction, all those things are weak links, and sometimes when you're not healthy, they can tear. Usually, I haven't seen too many hamstrings just pull apart completely. Usually there's fibers that tear in the middle of the belly of the muscle, and they get so inflamed and painful the patient usually stops. In some cases we'll see complete tears, like the biceps tendon. That's the muscle here. I've seen that tear off from here and get rolled up almost like a window shade. So it looks like the muscle belly is way up here. That's complete tear. Sometimes the Achilles tendon, which is down here, you can't see it, but it's down in the heel, calf, that can tear completely, and they, which are the gastroc muscles and the soleus muscles, can kind of curl up until a surgeon pulls the tear back together again. So the bottom line with a hamstring is that if it's injured, if it's overused, you can strain it or tear it. Again, tears are usually not complete. They're within the belly, and they, when torn, will cause a rush of blood into the belly of the muscle, and the muscle will shorten for a short time. Its shortening helps with healing. The average patient that I see, as long as they're healthy, it takes about 3 to 6 weeks to heal up. Now, if you continue to cause more and more damage, like a hiker that's or the marathon runner that's at 14 miles, strains a hamstring and continues with another, continues to the rest of the marathon, you're going to cause damage to that muscle. Not only that muscle, but the other compensatory muscles will hurt. Which brings me to, and that's why it's important to get into physical therapy. Sometimes as the muscle shortens, it shortens too tight, and it screws up the joint above and below the area, and it causes pathology with those joints. So sometimes it's nice to get motion going while you're waiting for the 3 to 6 week healing process to gently stretch the muscle so it doesn't get too tight. That's best done with a physical therapist or a chiropractor. If you do it on your own, some of you might be on pain medicines, some of you might have a very high pain tolerance, so you might actually cause more damage. So I suggest always seeking out a health professional to assist you in that. The acupuncture that I do will also help in the healing process. Not only does acupuncture help to relax muscle that's spasmed and allow it to lengthen a bit, it also helps in what's called the meridia or energy, to move energy. When you have a tear to the muscle, usually energy in Chinese medicine stops there and causes pain. So acupuncture needles, without getting too deep into the discussion, also help. And they're not like the hypodermic needles we use to draw blood. They're much finer. You usually can't feel them going in. They're really good with electricity. electric current like what's used in physical therapy will help to change the voltage or the charge of the area that's starting to get an influx of blood in and help movement. And if you have movement of blood flow, movement of muscle, you'll also have healing come on faster. So that's the way I like my patients, athletes or not athletes, to heal up. The objective is always to heal up with speed without causing any further damage. Sometimes I'll have patients that come in just with muscle spasms, Charlie horses, and that's different. That usually means that the muscle, which is, let's just take the hamstring again, that starts here and goes down here, it might not be torn anywhere. Whether it's the insertion of the tendon into the bone, whether it's the tendon connected to the muscle, it doesn't tear, but the function of the muscle is to always contract and relax, contract and relax. That's the way all muscle works, whether it's skeletal muscle or heart muscle. The heart muscle is built to just do it for 60 seconds a minute, every second for the rest of your life. So it's built for that continued endurance. Skeletal muscle is a little different. It acts with strength and it's supposed to be forceful. Sometimes if say your electrolytes are off, you're dehydrated, you don't have enough fluid, then the muscles, which depend on a sodium-potassium pump, calcium pump, the muscles don't have enough of the electrolytes to perform that pump action, so it'll start to contract and cramp. Instead of contracting and relaxing, it'll stay contracted. In fact, the brain will say relax and the muscle will continue to contract. Dehydration is one reason for Charlie horses or muscle cramps. Another reason is overuse, but that sometimes borders into the beginning of a strain. I use the analogy of a marathoner hitting the halfway point. Well, same thing if you're on a hike and you go farther than you usually go. Sometimes the muscle will start to say, I don't like going this far, I'm not ready for it, I'm not used to it. So it'll start to go into dysfunction, and that's when it contracts without you ordering it to contract, and that's felt as a spasm. Spasms are painful. They're meant to be painful because the body and the muscle is telling you it doesn't like what's going on. And usually the best way to take care of a spasm, and I'll use you can probably see it here now. This is the hamstring. This is where the calf muscle inserts and where it goes to in the heel. So those of you who experience Charlie horses, when this big muscle contracts and you don't expect it, it'll force you to take the toes this way. The muscle will contract. Usually the best thing to do is, if you can wait it out, you stretch the muscle. Stretching the muscle will stimulate something called a Golgi tendon organ, and that will usually tell the brain, oh, we're stretching, we're not supposed to cramp up, and it'll slowly relax. In acupressure, in acupuncture, we sometimes overstimulate the muscle at a certain point along its borders, and when you overstimulate it, after it's being contracted, when you overstimulate it, it just relaxes. You'll see my description of how a therapeutic is used to a trigger point in the trapezius. If you apply enough pressure, the trapezius relaxes. Same thing with a Charlie horse or a muscle spasm. I had the opportunity during one of my first marathons in Chicago as a physician. Joan Benoit Samuelson came by my medical station, and she was trying to break her own record to win. I think New Balance was offering $1 million bounty for breaking Joan Benoit Samuelson's record. She was trying to break her own record, but I don't think she made it. She was cramping up, and my medical station or medical tent was about the 14-mile mark, and she started to cramp up. So she stopped by my tent, and she asked me immediately to do acupressure to release the muscle. And I tried as much as possible. I think she had a peroneal. I tried as much as possible to relax it, but I don't know if it gave her any relief. I don't think she finished the marathon at that point. But that's typical for people who overuse or spasm up. Is try pressure, try stretching, definitely hydrate if you're dehydrated. And even if you're not dehydrated, sometimes people who are on, say, water pills make you pee. They're supposed to help with lowering blood pressure, but they also, unfortunately, the way they work is they make you pee off potassium. And what do you need to contract? You need sodium, potassium, calcium. Magnesium is also important. I think a lot of Americans try to avoid grain And in that, we sometimes avoid magnesium. If you don't eat any nuts, if you don't eat any bread, if you are gluten sensitive and trying to avoid that, then you're missing out on some things that are very nutritious, and sometimes magnesium, which is deficient, can cause muscle spasms. So I'll put a link to my magnesium talk. So that's the bottom line with the use of electrolytes, magnesium, acupressure. Finally, I'll make mention to some topical medicines that I suggest will also help with the spasm and the pain of inflammation around an area, but typically they get through the skin, to the bottom layer of the skin, to the fat layers, and maybe to muscle. It's hard to go through all that tissue layer with a topical medicine, but for the kids or the elderly with thin skin, it might be difficult compared to a pill, but you'll have less side effects as well. When you take pills, anti-inflammatories, steroids, even turmeric, magnesium, you can have side effects. Sometimes the most conservative way is topical, whether it's capsaicin or helichrysum or wintergreen or trameal. All of them work by trying to get through the top layer of skin into the area of irritation. Either way you choose, they have a wide variety. It's always important to ask your doctor first. I always like hands-on healing with an acupuncturist, massage therapist, reflexologist, chiropractor, physical therapist. It's all what's available to you at the fastest amount of time to get you back into either your work, your sport, or just being pain-free.